Sabah el Khair, Toastmasters, which is Arabic for Good Morning, Toastmasters. This is one of the few phrases I recently learned on my most recent journey to the land of hieroglyphics and pharaohs. I just got back from Egypt, where I, of course, saw the pyramids via a camel, which is an animal about as tall as it is not graceful, if you've ever been on one. I made my way down to the area outside of Mount Sinai and spent a wonderful evening in the wilderness. Then going on to Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, where I dipped my feet into the Red Sea. And unlike Moses, I decided not to part the waters. Hate to disrupt the boaters in the background, but had a glorious time there. Then went on to Luxor, where I saw majestic temples and even got to go into the belly of the tombs of the pharaohs at the Valley of the Kings. And there I had to stop and think for a moment about what those who were building the tombs might think if only they would have known that thousands of years later that the god most worshipped in the tombs of the pharaohs was not the pharaoh, was not Ra, was not Horus or any of the other gods, but that of the almighty selfie stick, which I saw used so much there in the Valley of the Kings. And then from Luxor, I got on a riverboat cruise and spent the next 4 days cruising down the Nile, stopping to see amazing sights, including the sunset like this. Has anybody in here ever been to Egypt? No? Maybe you have friends who have been, and you've seen some pictures framed like the ones that I've shown you, or a social media feed full of pictures of people on camels in front of pyramids, maybe even posed with a sarcophagus. But I'm guessing you may not have seen pictures like this, where you see everyday life in Egypt. This is a Friday market where people have brought in their carts of goods via their horses. I'm guessing you never saw a framed picture over a mantle of this, where it's the traffic and people piled into the back of a pickup. Because if you take a closer look, you'll actually see there's a lot of litter on the ground. Because I will tell you that Egypt is not a squeaky clean country. In fact, there's trash on the ground if you take a look. And I was reminded of that trash quite often by my co-travelers. You see, I went as a part of a larger group, and I was in one of 8 tour buses caravanning throughout Egypt. And we rode on a bus just like this. And from the inside of our tinted windowed bus, I began to hear the chatter. Look at that trash. Oh my goodness. Do they not care? Do they have no pride? How lazy are they? And I was actually shocked because I've been to Egypt one other time. I went on a Mediterranean cruise where we stopped at one port and drove down to Cairo, spent a day getting our picture taken on that camel, and back up to another port. And I will tell you that that time when I was there, the trash in Egypt, it looked more like this, where there were mounds on the streets, in the medians of the road. There were full lots that looked more like dumpsters. And so you can imagine how pleasantly surprised I was when I get to Egypt, and this is the trash that I see. And so I asked our guide, I said, Osama, I don't mean to be disrespectful, I hope this isn't offensive, but I have to ask, I was here before, and Egypt looks immaculately clean compared to what it was when there was so much trash here before. And I said, can you tell me more about it? And he said, well, sometimes the garbage collectors go on strike. And back in 2011, they had been on strike for years. For years. Now, how many of you have ever forgotten to put out your trash one week and you come home panicked because you have a whole other week that you have to live with that trash piling up, right? And it's scary, right? Now imagine that's not just 1 week, but it's week after week and month after month, year after year. Does that make you lazy? Does that mean you don't care? Or does that mean that there is something that is out of your control that is happening in the context of your community? But if we're only to look at another culture, another country, through one side of a tinted window bus and not get to know the context, that's what we might assume, as some of my co-travelers did. And it made me think, I wonder what would happen if there was a tinted windowed bus that went through our community. What would they say about us? About our consumerism? About our addiction to our phones? About the disbursement of our extended family? Would all of a sudden we be the bad guys, the lazy ones, the ones who aren't as good? Because when you're sitting on one side of a tinted window bus, it's easy to make assumptions. And on that side, you're always the good guy. You're always the right one. And those on the other side are not. But my hope is that we wouldn't be those kind of people. And if that is you, if you are not willing to be in part of a community and a culture where you're going to see a little bit of trash on the ground, then go to Germany, go to Norway, but don't go to Egypt. Because you're going to find a little trash on the ground. But I will tell you, I think that's a shame. Because you'll never get to see some of the incredible sights I saw, including one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. You'll never get to taste the food so rich in spices that it dances on the tip of your tongue. And you'll never get to know some of the incredible people that I met who were kind, incredibly hardworking, and oh so patient with a few judgmental Americans. But I encourage you to go and explore the cultures, getting to know the full context and story, and not just sitting and judging those behind your tinted windows. Thank you.